Welcome everyone to day 2, as some people would like to call it, fun day of a conference. We all know each other a bit better, so we're a bit more comfortable with each other. So let's sort of get things going. My name's Rehan Siddiqui. I'm one of the consultant psychiatrists with Naufar. And we're going to start off with Dr. Mary Tabacchi. Dr. Mary Tabacchi, we're very fortunate to have her. She is one of the world's leading experts on wellness, and as we all know, wellness is a very important core belief of Naufar. She has been a professor at Cornell University since 1972, which is 2 years more than I've been on this planet. So just to give you some context, and I know what some of you are thinking, I don't look a day over 18, but I'm not. So she has numerous credits. She's taught in Paris in the 90s. She's been responsible for the corporate culture accepting or introducing wellness into their curricula. So I'm not going to go on much longer, and I'll let her take the floor. Thank you very much, Dr. Tabacchi, and we're very privileged to have you.
Okay, I got the picture. So at any rate, I step back from the medical model a little bit and think about what it's like to prevent some of the problems we're seeing. And not only is this preventive thing so important, we heard so much yesterday about what may cause people to go toward addiction. And so I think anything we can do to prevent is a big start. So what I'd like to do is move forward a little bit. You all know this. I mean, this is something I looked for me because I wanted to think about how this is a pandemic. Anywhere in the world, this is a problem. So at any rate, it's a problem the world over. It's not unique to any culture. My own country has these problems as we've tried to stop people from being in pain, and then we start them on that path. And now we've legalized cannabis, so we don't know where that's going either. So a lot of interesting facts are happening here that are kind of frightening, but the good news is you folks are here trying to think about it. I'm not going to dwell on this slide, but people who get drugs illicitly mostly get them from their parents or their friends. Think about it, family structure. I'm going to talk a little bit about addictions to other things, because part of wellness is to recognize that we're all addicted to something. For instance, this morning, I wanted coffee. I had to have coffee. Okay, so that's kind of an addiction, if you will. So I want to talk about these because it's important to realize that there, as you all know, there are opioid receptors in the brain, and we're all addicted to something. So whether or not it be, I used to know how to do this, whether or not it be gambling, or sex, or being attached to the internet, or shopping, oh, get out that credit card, okay? Or being addicted to games, as the young man is up here, or food. Someone asked about obesity and addiction to to food. I don't know, whatever. This one over here with this woman in the bikini has to do with some people are addicted actually to cosmetic surgery. They want to look more and more beautiful. And probably I fit in part of this last one, risk-taking. Some people get a big thrill, they get a big high, if you will, from risk-taking. And then the other thing that I want to talk about is a preventive thing, and that's called exercise. I don't need to go on and on about how this works because you guys know this better than ever. than I'll ever know. But I want to start kind of here at the bottom. The endocannabinoid system is when we, as you guys know better than I do, is when we produce our own opioid, so to speak. I'm addicted to exercise. If we don't get up and do some kind of exercise in the morning, we're not quite on top of it. So there are many ways to be addicted is my point. And you all have taken this very empathetic, compassionate take on addiction, as we all should, because we all really do have the things we have to do. So there's a theory, and I'll say very quickly, there's a theory that there's a theory that back in evolution, well, we always keep evolving, but in the early days of man, people had to run, hunter-gatherers, after their food or away from the saber-toothed tiger or whatever, and they had to be, and they were rewarded for that through endocannabinoids, okay? Because they had those receptors in the brain. So it didn't just happen as soon as we invented marijuana, et cetera, or whatever else, or whatever drug of choice. It's been there for a long, long time. The idea was that that was survival of the species, whether it be addiction to having children or whether it be addiction to any kind of behavior, but particularly the exercise thought. So I keep that in mind when I get up and need to exercise. So enough of that. I'll talk a little bit more about this, but this is more your field. But interestingly, the endocannabinoid anandamide, as many of you people know about, was discovered years ago in Israel by a man who was looking at how cannabis affected the brain and discovered this anandamide molecule, which is very interesting if you think of Sanskrit and Ananda. So anyway, now I'm finally down to wellness. Okay, I gave you what was happening here, but down to wellness. Wellness is not something that just happens. It's a continuum. And so the continuum here is that you can be on the high end of wellness, or if you get too addicted, or if you, as you age, et cetera, or whatever happens, or if you lead a rather unhealthy lifestyle, you slide more toward this way on the wellness, what we call the continuum. This is not originally mine. This was discussed early on by a early pioneer of wellness by John Travis in 1972. So it's not new, this wellness thing, even though it's finally grown. And I think he had a very, very good point. As you go out toward high-level wellness, you're doing all the things it takes: good nutrition, good exercise, mind, body, meditation, et cetera. You're doing all those good things to keep you healthy. And as you slide down here, you're sliding into worrying about your health, drug therapy, surgery, losing normal function. So I think that's the wellness continuum. And again, it's not original with me. I want to talk a bit about something we call the blue zones. Have you heard of the blue zones? Okay, some people have heard of the blue zones. The blue zones are places in this world where folks live to be in their 90s or late 80s healthfully. They don't become wheelchair bound. They don't need a lot of the props we need in modern society to succeed. I'm having trouble with this thing. Okay, is it okay now? At any rate, they don't need a lot of what we think we need in modern times, in quote, civilization. These people have family all around them. They eat very healthfully, if not frugally. Not that they don't have food, but they just don't overeat. They exercise throughout life. 90-year-olds are out tending their own garden or preparing food for their relatives to come over and celebrate. It's a very together group. And this happens in these 5 blue zones. And so if you study those blue zones, so to speak, which is not original, it was founded by a National Geographic fellow called Dan Buettner that you've probably all heard or seen on TV. So these isolated places, I guess Loma Linda is not so isolated anymore, but these more isolated places have these people who live into old age without all the infirmatives we have. So what's the deal here? What are these guys doing right? Well, they're way up high on that wellness continuum. They live until they die, so to speak. So what's the secret there? Well, you saw it on the wellness continuum, and you'll see it here. Moderate, regular physical activity is a good thing. You don't have to run the New York or the Boston Marathon. It's kind of fun for people who do it as a challenge, but you don't have to do that to be healthy. But you do need regular physical activity. Life purpose. You have to have a purpose, otherwise you can wander down that path and live on addictions, as we all know, because it's so easy to do that. The path of least resistance, which turns out to be the greatest path of resistance. Stress reduction, okay. How do we deal with mind-body things to keep us from being overly stressed? Moderate caloric intake, I mentioned that with the blue zones. Don't overeat. Michael Pollan, the famous author, says, it's not very hard to figure out what to eat. Eat plants mostly. Eat food. By that, he means less processed food. Eat food as we know food, which you do here brilliantly. Mostly plants, not too much. As a person who studied dietetics, he's got it right there, okay? Not too much, plant-based. Moderate alcohol intake. If you don't use alcohol, don't start it to be healthy. Someone started that and there's not all that much to it, okay? So engage in spirituality or religion. Big one, okay? Spirituality, however you approach it from whatever direction, is so important. Engagement in family life. Wow. Engagement in social life. Everybody knows that. So the more you can be with family and friends, the better. And that's these blue zones. So there are pillars of wellness because everybody wants to know what wellness is. Well, I've spelled it out in many different ways, but this is just another way to look at it. Emotional, ability to understand ourselves and to cope with whatever's going on. Once you learn to cope, some of this becomes easier. The trick is, as I say up here, simply learn to cope. Oh yeah, sure, okay. Ability to get fulfillment from our job, whether it be caregiving, whether it be being a physician, whether it mean being a professor or occupational therapy or whatever we do, have a life purpose. Intellectually, we really have to keep learning. It's another reason I was thrilled to be invited here. I love to learn. And the more I could sit and hear you people talk about something that was relatively new to me, the more my brain cells perked up. But I said, oh, I got to ask this question. I asked too many questions. Don't worry. Environmental. That's a big issue, a huge issue. It's something we talk about but don't always do. What are we doing to preserve our environment for the future, for our grandkids, great-grandkids? What are we doing? Some countries are doing a lot, some countries are not. Spiritual? Yes, big time. I mentioned it and I'll mention it again. Whether it's a yoga practice, whether it's a religious practice, whatever kind of spiritual practice you have, keep it up. It keeps that mind engaged. It keeps that mind thinking. It keeps that mind giving respect and compassion for others. Physical, okay. You know, I'm a nut about physical activity. My husband and I climb mountains for the fun of it, okay, at a very rapid speed. I used to be a runner. I can't run as much anymore. It has something to do with age or mind, I don't know which, but I can power hike. We can do power yoga and do it almost as well as the 20-year-olds in our class. So again, a lot of this is in the mind, this physical ability. Social, of course. People, I mean, you've seen the data. People who have a spouse live longer than people without a spouse. People who have a roommate live longer than people without a roommate. This sort of checking on each other is good. Does that mean I have 5 minutes left or 5 minutes to go? Or 5 minutes left? Oh, cool. All right. All right, so this is good because the first part of my talk is going to finish just like I thought. I have some other information, so if you want to come to my workshop, I'll be happy to share that with you too. So wellness, physical fitness, movement, activity, whatever it takes, healthful foods. Diet is a 4-letter word. I'm a dietitian, as well as a PhD in biochemical nutrition and on and on and on. Diet is a 4-letter word, okay? You really need to think about eating well every day so you don't have to go on a diet, okay? Social, I mentioned all that. Social activity, be together. Emotional, accept each other. Accept who you are and live with it. Work-life balance, intellectual, environmental, spiritual. I've been over and over and over. All this slide says is you can spend a lot of money on health care. I call that sick care, by the way. Health care is sort of taking care of sick people. I don't know, my mind still has to wrap itself around that. So the US spends the most money on health care, but we have the least good outcome. So you can't just throw money at it. You have to be proactive like you folks are here. That's the only point of this messy slide. So thank you very much.
I've got a question, actually.
Okay.
And I hope this isn't too controversial. But are wellness and substance misuse mutually exclusive? I ask this because there are some people from sort of the wellness background who have argued that they're not mutually exclusive and can coexist. I don't know what thoughts you had about that.
Well, I think they need to coexist because I think if you're going to prevent or heal, if we care about healing people, if they're abusing substance too much, then I think they have to coexist. I think they cannot be mutually exclusive. In fact, I would argue that whatever stage of wellness you're in, whether you're, and as I pointed out, you can be addicted to many things, and substance is just one of them, or whether it's alcohol or whatever is happening in your life. But you have to keep up wellness. You can't lose, I mean, you don't want to lose your spirituality. You don't want to lose your ability to hike, et cetera, et cetera. My big argument here is, and I didn't get to it, which is just great. You've heard enough of me. But can we, and I've got a lot to talk about there, can we substitute a healthy addiction to a less healthy addiction? The only way you're going to do that is to stay involved, is to try to reach that end of the wellness continuum. You can't just say, oh, I'm hooked, so I can't get over this. Well, people do, as you all work with them every day. But you really have to say to yourself, all right, I have this issue, but I've got to stay involved. So I'm a big proponent of let's substitute one addiction for a healthier addiction. Now, that's hard Because if you're really, truly down and out, some of the people you deal with, you're not going to get up and run, okay? It's going to have to be gradual. But is there a way we can substitute? We have opioid centers, and we've had them since primitive man. So if we've had them this long, they have to be good for something. And it means that we can produce them within the body if we run, if we enjoy social engagement, if we have mind-body work, if we do yoga, if we do mindfulness meditation. We have those centers in the brain that we can fulfill this with by our activities. That's what wellness is really all about. I hope you agree, because that's my theme song for this. And I'll talk to you later. Other questions?
Good morning, and thank you very much for such an interesting start to the day. It's very, very reassuring for me that you talked about wellness, but you put as a central component family connection and engagement. I mean, that reassures me, as I'm very fortunate that my work is with meeting families. So I haven't necessarily got a question, just I feel quite reassured listening to you this morning. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just in treating whether it's depression or anxiety or addictions, some people really take to it, but a lot of people, it's hard to motivate them. What are some of your strategies for motivating people who don't take to this exercise and lifestyle stuff easily?
That's the $64 billion question. How do you motivate people? Because, for instance, because I am inherently or have been a runner for more years than anybody wants to know, I can meditate after I exhaust myself. I can't meditate first. So maybe it has to be whatever you enjoy first and then move into the other components of wellness. For instance, we know that those opioid centers are turned on by spicy foods. They're turned on by procreation. They're turned on by our friends. They're turned on. My opioid centers go nuts when I'm with a good orchestra. So maybe we have to start with some of those pleasures of life. And I'm not a psychotherapist, so I don't know, but but there's a lot that can turn me on. Well, I know. So so I'm here proposing to you. I'm here proposing to you, and this is really, I'm serious. How can we substitute one addiction for another? And I don't know if you've tried it. And I know when I feel down and out, which isn't very often because I'm up like the Energizer Bunny, but when I feel down and out, it's really hard to get me moving, and I know I need to get moving. So, and you folks know that. So, yes, so I would start with some other, what they call, there was a book written in the 70s, and I can't think of the author. It was called Healthy Pleasures. And it was all about do something that you enjoy before you try to move in to be ultra healthy. I mean, an example in that book, and it still sticks in my brain, we worried everybody to death about cholesterol level. And it turns out that stress is worse than any high cholesterol level in the damage it does to your arteries. Duh, okay? So we put people on this stringent diet. No. They needed something very different. So how can we change the paradigm? How can we look at this whole person in this wellness stance and figure out something very pleasurable for them besides their drug of choice or their addiction of choice? I'm really pleased to be here and suggest that. And I don't know, maybe I'll have to do some studies to think about that, but I really want us to seriously think about that, which is why I talked about all those types of addiction.
Thank you, Mary. Here on the left.
Oh, here you are, okay.
You have definitely motivated me to leave this conference and go and do some exercises. A gentleman from New York, Professor Everold Hussein, I had a very good session with him here in Doha. He talks about learning from business people.
Yes.
We in the psychosocial field, we have not used Maslow's hierarchy
Okay.
as the people in the business did.
And you know, that's what it's all about, that
Yeah.
hierarchy,
Yeah.
self-fulfillment.
Someone gave him a leaflet about the importance of physical exercises, about cardiovascular and cholesterol and whatever. It did not connect with him. And he's an advisor to WHO changing behavior.
That's what it's about.
Leaflets, campaign might not change behavior. We still need to do a lot of work on connecting with the individual. What is relevant to that individual? It might not be a scientific cardiovascular things. It could be something else. And I think, following the previous question, how to motivate, is how to connect. And this is the movement this man does. How we connect with the person so that he or she change the behavior. Thank you.
And I think that compassion that I heard the first day really struck a chord with me. Compassion. There, but for the grace of God go I, okay? So we need to understand that very connectivity, and all you therapists know that. And that's a hard thing to develop. I teach, and so sometimes my students will think I'm not very compassionate. And so you have to back up and say, okay, I need to think about what's going on in their brain versus what's going on in my brain. So yeah, that connectivity, what I felt at this conference is so much wellness, because that connectivity with all you people that I don't know, I've read about some of you and read your work and tried to understand it. That connectivity to me resonated almost as much as what you're saying. Does that make sense?
Thank you for your presentation. I think this is the ideal framework of every intervention for treatment of dependence, and also for prevention. I think that doing this from the behavioral point of view, spirituality point of view, interpersonal relationship point of view is absolutely what is needed in any center, outpatient, inpatient, etc. My doubt, apart the question of Ned Nunes asking about how to motivate the people to enter, the other issue I think we should consider is that we cannot expect that everyone is responding to this wellness program or wellness proposal in the same way. I'm sure that you know that, for example, it's described by Professor Kube a reward deficit syndrome. A syndrome where people are completely not rewarded by the ordinary rewards of life.
Right.
They need, you have demonstrated, the people, for example, doing extreme sport, you know, for them a normal reward of life is nothing, it's not giving any reward. They need something above, you know, something over the lines. And there has been described recently an Ananda deficit syndrome, with people are metabolizing too fast their endocannabinoids and remaining in a condition where happiness, euphoria, etc., are not so granted for free for them. So clearly we can expect that you can say to people, go and run, go and have physical exercise. For us it's very relaxing, very good, take away anxiety, etc. For them, at least initially, is not so evident. So in reality, the issue of motivation is related to the fact that you have difficulty motivating people who are not responding at the same way in respect to the other people. So in reality, our disease we are taking care in this conference is really so complex that we cannot imagine that the people affected by substance use disorder or the people that will be affected by substance use disorder are responding in the same way that the people are normal.
But they don't. Good point, very good point. I mean, that's that whole thing of
If anyone has any more questions, they can attend Dr. Mary's workshop, but this will be the last
Are we
question.
going to have one more? Okay.
We discuss wellness, but I saw
Can you speak a little more into the mic?
we discuss wellness, but we forget sex. We put sex as addiction, which is interesting. We have in our hospital group of treatment for them. But really, an important part of the wellness is having the pleasure of sex.
Absolutely, and again, that is kind of an evolutionary thing. If we don't enjoy sex, we're done, okay? We don't have children anymore.
And that will motivate people also.
Oh, all right. Oh, all right. I'm thinking of a model. No, just go on.
To move to wellness, because there are many studies, you know definitely about it, that people, when they stop sex, there is a high possibility they will die in 5 years. So there is a close relationship between the two, which we need to push forward, I think.
I couldn't agree more. How one does that is a whole nother issue, but I could not agree more. I've thought about it because it probably raises those Ananda needs, et cetera, higher than anything else we can do.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tabacchi.